Hey everybody, my name's Alex, and this is Bento Radio. Now, before we get started, obviously the normal podcast stuff. If you like this show, be sure to subscribe to it wherever you're seeing it, which is on YouTube, or wherever you're listening to it, which is your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to leave a review on that podcast platform, a 5-star review would really help the show. If you absolutely love the show, and especially right now, I encourage you to go over to bento-box.ghost.io. That website will be everywhere for you to click in the description of this episode on YouTube and in the description of the episode on your favorite podcasting app. The reason to go there this week is actually because I just attended Anime NYC as press. I have an interview to host over there eventually with Mako-chan, the director of the new Ghost in the Shell adaptation that's airing, if you're in America at least, it's airing over on Amazon Prime right now. That thing is exceptional, but I got to sit down with him for a little bit and ask him a couple questions. So you can go check that out over there eventually as soon as I literally write up the interview and get it approved, which I will probably be doing shortly after I'm done here. But you can also see my write-ups of each individual day, with the exception of day 4, which will be accompanying this podcast, and we'll talk about that in a second. But on that note, let's jump into my thoughts on Anime NYC 2026. Now, before I get into my thoughts about Anime NYC as a whole, which I definitely have a ton of, I want to just quickly go through the 4th day, because I think that's the most. Let me start over. The 4th day is always a really relaxed affair compared to the first 3. In the year before 2025, when they added the 4th day, this would essentially be the 3rd day, but it would be slightly less relaxed because they just had less time to fit everything. They had less time to fit everything in, so there were still really big things you could go do on the 4th day. In this case, I really only went to 2 things. I went to a screening, which was a screening of, I've got the second Crunchyroll screenings thing written down, but the screening was of the first episode of the 2nd season of A Returner's Magic, reincarnated as a space mercenary, and FX Fighter Kurumi and Tomb Raider King. To be honest, I think that the middle shows and also the 2 shows that are the newest in that pack of 4 were the best. FX Fighter Kurumi is the Moe Blob does financial investing show that you've probably seen floating around the internet. That thing is an anxiety producer. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. The closest thing I've seen to a show like this is, and it's hilarious because the show came out right around it came out and was very much focused around the last financial crisis, is a show that called C, Possibility of Money and Control, and that thing's wild. If you've never seen C, Possibility of Money and Control, give it a look. It's wild. It's insane. But, so that's FX Fighter Kurumi, and then Reincarnated Space Mercenary. It's a reincarnation isekai, but it's done with an explicit sci-fi bend to it and flavor to it. It feels a little bit like we have Outlaw Star at home, if that makes any sense. But it seems competent enough to be a pretty okay time. Return Magic and Tomb Raider King, both, this is not my thing, is what I'll say, to be charitable about it. And then but after that, the next thing I did was I've got an app for these things. The next thing I did was I went to, what was the name of the panel? Being obnoxious. By the way, if you ever go to these, and I'll probably say this again at some point, if you ever go to a convention like this, their apps, as much as they are annoying, they're also really useful because you can really get into it and plan your day and all that stuff. I went to the voice actor spotlight for Stephanie Sheh, who you might know as Sailor Moon, as the current Sailor Moon, I believe. And I try to go to at least one voice actor thing a convention because they're absolutely PR opportunities, but they're also really interesting if they're done right. in my opinion, done right. This voice actor, you're just getting access to this voice actor. It's usually a Q&A session, and it's hosted by somebody and the voice actor there, so there's maximum scaffolding around it to make it a good time for everybody involved. And the Q&A stuff always does a good job of setting up so you get the most information possible out of it. The one with Steve Blum that I went to, I think I went to that 2 years ago. It was really interesting because he's been doing it for a long time. So people just lined up and went for broke. And hilariously, the question I wanted to ask got asked immediately before me. And so and the backup question also got asked. So I resorted to my backup question, and I asked it knowing it was bad, and a bad stereotypical question. There are good stereotypical ones, but this was a bad stereotypical question. He looked directly into my eyes, and he's like, "Oh, all your other questions were asked, weren't they?" Yep, that's totally what happened. He proceeded to give the answer both of us knew in our souls he was going to give. And it was useful in that way, I guess. I forget what I asked him, but it was not what I wanted to ask him. I originally wanted to ask him about working with Logic, and somebody just straight up did that before me, so it happened. But it also gives you those kinds of panels with just the voice actors are a good look into the industry very often, too, because they are a vital part, not just of the anime industry, not just in the way that they are voice actors, but also very often they have access to the people who make the stuff we love, and they get to meet those people and oftentimes sit down with the Japanese voice actors or character designers or directors in a more intimate way than even somebody who gets to interview those people like me gets to. And so that access plus the aspect that they are contributing to the work gives them perspectives you don't get. Like, Stephanie had a whole story about, because she voices Mizuha in Your Name. She had a whole anecdote about meeting Makoto Shinkai and what it's like to work on a Makoto Shinkai thing, because he is so all-encompassing in what he does. And that was really interesting, because you might even get that from Makoto Shinkai himself, because that's an external, many steps removed view on what he does that he just might not have. He's probably aware of it, but he just might not have it, and it might not be the way he talks about his work. So those are always really, I find them really interesting, and a great way to spend a lazy last day of the con is to find one of these panels and go to that panel. I think last year I went to a talk show one that I also thought was really fun and great. The other thing that's great about this is, and I'll get into this a little bit, I'll get into this more when I'm talking about the convention as a whole in a little bit, but the other thing that's good about this is you get to see not our industry, but you get to see parts of the anime industry treated the wider entertainment landscape in a way that doesn't happen a whole lot still. It's kind of equivalent, I always think, to those pre-roll interviews that Disney started, that I think that even Miramax and then later Disney started putting on Studio Ghibli films. Oh, this film should be treated like this precious thing because it's a big deal, so we're going to treat it like we would treat a major Hollywood release at the time, which was to get all the actors in a room and interview them about stuff and talk to them and attach the celebrity of Christian Bale to Howl's Moving Castle, or notoriously the great interview with, I forget who plays San in the English dub of Princess Mononoke, but there's this conversation where she's talking about fighting with her daughter about some of the merch because it's so cute and fun. She's like, I got one of these and it immediately disappeared because my daughter took it. She was talking about the Kodama. They got merch of the little Kodama guys, of course they did. And she's like, it just belongs to my daughter now. But, so it's like a live action, an in-person version of that, which is really nice. And it is a great last addition to the vibes that go along with a good convention. So now I want to shift to talking about the whole. So, and I want to break this into 3 or 4 sections. And the first section I think I want to tackle is the format. And the format is a big one, actually, because many conventions are 3 days. It is unique that Anime NYC is 4. It's not the only 4-day convention. I think AgFest is also 4 days. But that format of a 4-day long anime convention is important to the way it feels, but it's also not really true. Because if you ever go to a convention, it's a standard 3-day convention, there's really only one full day. Because the first day, the last day is the half day. So essentially, altogether you have 2 full days worth of programming. In the case of a 4-day convention, that goes up to, you have about 3 full days of programming. But in each day, the panels that are first up usually get screwed in terms of attendance, because it's harder. You gotta get into the convention as an attendee, and you gotta get to the panel room, and that takes time when you're literally entering the building at first. For me, it's a little different in Anime NYC because I'm press, and they give us a secret room that we can hang out in when we're waiting for the convention to open, also, which is great because you can go in there, you can set up for the day, you can do stuff like sort out the previous day, set up your current day. For me, it was being in there with a lot of double check all my camera stuff. Because if you've been following my photography-focused Instagram, you'll notice I took some really excellent cosplay photos for the entire convention, and I'll probably do something more substantial with those over on bento-boxghost.io. I just gotta sit down and figure that out. But I think I want to put them into a zine collection or something. But the format of an anime convention, even at the day level then, has issues. In that there's going to be panels that people will want to see. So you need to put them in the middle of the day. And this is true of every convention. I think this is kind of bad. These conventions don't give you any room to reasonably just take a break and eat. They're scheduled wall to wall. Sometimes you just gotta look at something and be like, I need 30 minutes to go shove some chicken tenders in my mouth. And it's really, a lot of press people tell you this. People, they just starve themselves at these conventions because they're so excited to go to all these panels. And you really shouldn't do that because it'll just make your time there kind of worse. So, like I said, using the provided app for a convention like Anime NYC, I'm sure the Anime Expo has one. Most conventions of any kind have one. Is a really useful way to see everything that's happening and schedule it all accordingly, so you can fit everything in and you can move stuff so nothing's overlapping too badly, and so you can make everything, also get lunch, also all that stuff. And so back to the problem of it being this being a 4-day con. They added the 4th day last year. I don't explicitly know why they added the 4th day, but my gut feeling is they added the 4th day to just give more surface area for stuff. But interestingly enough, I don't think they're using that very well, and I think that they should rethink the programming of the raw programming of the event, because my suspicion is that there's panels that not a whole lot of people are going to, that they could make it more attractive to go to. And what I mean there is, and also they could be accepting panels that they're not accepting currently. So there's an idea that you want to program a convention and you want to program it with stuff that people want to see. That makes total sense. But there are people who want to do panels who are maybe first-time panelists, who are maybe younger, and you don't know whether or not their panel will crash and burn. Think of these as indie panels, essentially. The unique opportunity that Anime NYC has with its first day, since they have a 4-day con, is they could use that as the indie day. They could use that, and because that day doesn't have a whole lot going on. And so what you have left is, both years now, is essentially the Netflix showcase, which I didn't bother going to that day, and nothing else. And this happened also with a little bit with the Gachakuda, with the, what's it called? It starts with a B, not the Gachakuda. With the Kagurabachi screening. You can tell I didn't go to that thing. people want to get out of the way of those things. So nobody wants to schedule stuff. Nobody wants to schedule stuff on the first day of the con anyway. But Netflix is big enough of a pull where they can just schedule their Anime NYC showcase event and go and do their thing. I've yet to ever attend a Netflix showcase event at Anime NYC, and people didn't say it was some kind of boondoggle in some way, by the way, which is saying something important about that thing. But I think what you could do with the first day, you could take a bunch of panels that you wouldn't otherwise run and be like, let's just do this on this day and pack it wall with these things. Let them figure out attendance of, like, oh, did people like this or did people not like this? But also let first panelists have the safety of possible low attendance of their panel, where they cannot feel the pressure of doing it the first time. To give you an idea of the first time I did a panel, because I did panels at Liberty City Anime for a lot of years that was running, for like years in a row. But at the end, I think I was doing like panels by the end of that 4 years. First time I did my panel, which was called Full Metal and Beyond, an exploration of disability anime. We were in the Times Square Marriott, and they put me in like the ballroom upstairs. They put me in, it was like out of the way, but they put me in the biggest panel rooms. And I didn't know that. A, they put me in one of the biggest panel rooms. B, I almost filled that thing on my first year, which was very heartwarming. But also, the projector broke. So I had to give the entire panel with no visuals. Which, bravo to that entire audience for just being like, oh, this is just how this is going to be. Cool. No, just listening to a lecture. It's fine. That was really nerve-wracking. And I was absolutely ecstatic that I pulled it off. Even with the technical difficulties. I almost had to just yell at them because we weren't even sure if the mic was working. But that, and actually in that way, doing what I'm saying would give all the technical staff a dry run of like, here's been a break, here's what's weird, whatever. Because I did note in a couple panels that like, the guy had to come in and screw with stuff a bunch of times in some of the panels. But you could take all the like, quote indie panels and you could shove them into that day, and you could give the like, that half Thursday essentially, this feeling of being a truly like fan A, because there'd be all of these fan run panels that are obviously a staple of any convention, but I feel like, and I'm going to get to this in a second, but I feel like Anime NYC's for an identity right now, because it has very fan-oriented thing that is not true of something like Anime Expo. So, on that note, I want to move to like my next section, so to speak. And it's the kind of vibes of the convention. And this is telling because next year, and they announced this like on the 4th day before the con was closed, they were already promoting the 10th anniversary convention here, because Anime NYC started in 2017. I think it might have gone in 2017. I might have gone all years that weren't pandemic year to this convention, but I only have badges to support up back to 2019, and I don't know where my 2025 badge is. I have no clue. I have lanyards from 2025 and pictures. I don't know where the friggin' badge is, though. I feel kind of everybody I talked to about this thing. A lot of that was because there wasn't enough programming people wanted to go to. Everybody I talked to didn't know what to do with the first day, and I suspect that was kind of true of the last day too. Just because those both feel like startup and wind down days, in a way where and it's always kind of gonna feel like that. But I think in terms of the last day, I think it's good that it feels like you're winding back down into reality. But on the first day, I think if you made it that indie day that I talked about, I think that would give people more of a reason, A, to maybe even only buy a third day badge. I didn't see anybody walking around with a third day badge. I saw people walking around with 4-day badges, but I saw people walking around with a Sunday badge. And I think that the convention, part of the reason why people felt like it was lackluster, especially in terms of programming and guests this year, was this con wanted to be just more than the other years I've attended. This thing wanted to be an old school fan convention in the vein of something like Liberty City Anime used to be. The one in East Orange, New Jersey that I think overwent like a year or two, because it was only a year or two before COVID hit. And COVID really screwed up the convention landscape completely, not just anime conventions, but comic book conventions and, music professional conventions, because it's a whole layer of them that used to exist that couldn't just hit pause and then start up again. Like something like NYC could. And it has to do with convention center contracts and stuff like that, because those onerous and very important. Like, the kind of like could be a couple dollars in many cases. Now there's for that, but that's part of the expense of these things and putting them on. But I think the convention embraced the fandom a little bit more and embraced the commercialism a little bit less. You would get more, people would be more satisfied, because a big part of these conventions is you get to go be with your people. I mean, I'm mid-30s now, and I'm not as connected to kind of like in meat space as I was when I was a teenager, because I can be self-selectingly around people who are into this thing. And I think that's good for the perspective of my show, because so often when you hear from like YouTubers, and they're no longer, and this is true of me to a certain extent, considering I just went to an anime convention. Ostensibly, the ticket was free because I went as press, but look like to YouTubers that we're technically the industry machine in a way, but because I'm not like any money from any of the production companies, from any of the licensors, at least not currently, or ever, I believe. Don't quote on that, but I don't. I've been for writing about anime, but from a pretty fan-oriented perspective, that other creators don't have, purely because they have so much more access. And while on some level I would like that access, I also like the fact that I'm giving you the perspective of somebody who, like, but also I work a normal job that had nothing to do with it. Because that's people's experience. And having this thing where you can just be with your people, so to speak, and like once they're in the groove, everybody's a little bit more, everybody's a little bit more friendly, and like they're a little more comfortable, and you can have with people, like, and you're all there for a common reason, which like gives you a level that you don't get in the real world very often. And so, like, I always end up having conversations at these things, and like and if you've done the Anime NYC subreddit, you'll see that like people talking about meeting people, for time in reality, what they've known online, but also just like meeting people in general, because it gives permission to demonstrate your fandom, where you have a reasonable expectation that like people will be into it and people will understand. You can see things about like people going to these conventions just to make fun of cosplayers, or what people call LARPing now, which is essentially just like which to call cosplaying as an anime fan. And that always kind of breaks me, because like you don't go to people, but like you're kind of coming in house to screw with us, and that's not cool. And part of the reason why people have an adverse reaction to like influencer culture anime is because it feels like you're milking the fandom to your own ends. It feels like not that this is the wrong way to be a fan of anime, but if you're watching the most hype shows, if you're only talking about the like hottest controversy of the day, and you're not as engaged, that to a veteran fan of the thing like me, I look at you and I'm like, you're not deep enough into the waters. And it's not a matter of time or a matter of time spent. That just, if you do it for a long time, you end up watching more complex things. But if you choose it, you can choose right now to just go to Netflix and just pump Evangelion into your brain and watch that and like experience that for the first time. You can choose to go find Freyrin over something like Dragon Ball Super. You can choose to engage with the medium in deeper and more meaningful and complex ways, and like, it's fine if you choose not to do that, but it's not fine if you choose to ridicule and take advantage of people who do choose to like show some passion towards the medium above and beyond what you think is average or what you think is even acceptable. Because there is no guideline for that. But like this, because it feels, and my gut's not that people feel that it's lackluster. I think that's what people, there's a programming schedule was lackluster, or the guest schedule was lackluster. My gut is that they feel it was lackluster compared to how much of a industry and corporate industry presence there is at these things. Because it's often these conventions have two layers to them. And you used to see this a lot with E3 and and a lot of the video game reporting, especially out of like Giant Bomb, really good at framing this for people, in that there are two layers to these conventions. There's the first layer, it's a fan layer, and then there's the secondary layer, which is the entire professional layer of it. Like, when I'm going to these conventions, because I'm a press member, I get access to things you'll never even see. Namely, interviews, and we get sent an interview list where we literally, like, this person, here's the list, because they want to be able to translate it in advance, and also that's the way anime companies work, blah, 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 blah. If you're just a American property or distributor, they'll just be like, tell us you want to interview them. We don't need questions for them. They know how interviews work in America. But my point is that, like, I know for a fact that, like, Artist Alley are happening between the Artist Alley and between publishers, and publishers are having conversations independently with press and setting those things up in, like, side rooms you'll never even perceive as happening. And that's one thing. And then there's the fan experience. And what I think is happening is this Anime NYC is the fan experience is becoming shallower, and the professional experience is either staying the same or getting better. And what happens when you get that is you get a weird hollow middle, because most people's experience of the convention might not be as worth it to them as mine was, because I got to sit down with the director and talk to them. As a fan, that's a very cool thing to get to be able to do. I'm going to do something with that on a professional level, but you as a general attendant just don't get to do that. And you have no way into that because you aren't a press member and you don't have the kinds of numbers or history with being a press member that lets you apply to that. So I was saying the format could lean harder into fandom engagement with itself by making that Indie Day happen, by proving more fan panels in general. Because I know that panel room is limited and there's only a certain amount of hours in a day, but I was kind of amazed at the fact that I don't think I went to I think the only After Dark panel I went to was the first Crunchyroll screening. And which was wild to me, that they put a Crunchyroll screening at the end of the day. Now I think about it, they put a screening at the end of the day and at the beginning of the following day. But very often, once again, if you're worried about content and stuff, you can be putting fan panels in the After Dark section. There were, as far as I remember, there was no adult anime screenings, like stuff. To me, the After Dark schedule for this convention felt less like, oh, this is 18 plus, and more like, oh, this is where we had to fit extra stuff, or stuff that we think it might be relatively lower attendance, which just feels like last year they had J18, so the H manga publisher, brought and they did it again this year, but they figured out a way to do it in the daylight. They brought an H manga artist and let people interview him and let people ask him questions, and that was a live drawing I got to go see. That was very cool. I covered that on my write-ups about last year. It was very cool. But this year, just like the After Dark stuff was just weird. And now I want to get into the next and maybe the last section, and that is the con floor itself. Because I think that the con floor is always a double-sided coin to me. Because it's this big, open, reforming of reality to be like, you're in this giant anime marketplace that's half professional, half indie. And in the case of, I don't think that Anime NYC is alone in this, but I think it's unique in this. Anime NYC has a really exceptional artist alley. And it was bigger than it ever was this year. It was bigger the previous year than it was the year before. And I know that the booths are incredibly expensive. They're just incredibly expensive. But I also know for a fact that part of the reason why artists do Artist Alley, especially for long periods of time, is because they make bank. They make so much money. Wild amounts of money. You can see there's a bunch of videos out about the breakdown financially of what it looks like to do Artist Alley, and you'll see, they make rent for half a year sometimes. And I know from this year, an artist who I met this year, and I talked to her all 4 days, I straight up let it go, and she's like, I didn't know you could make this much money from these shows. She's like, I didn't know you could make this much money. But I think that's a double-sided coin, like I said, because while I think the dealer's room is nice, I don't think it's the best part of the convention. If you're going to these conventions and you're only wandering around the dealer's room, you're not getting the most out of your bag. Just full stop. You should be going to panels and screenings, and if you have any aspiration of talking about this stuff in a even in a semi-pro way, the way I do at this point, or in a professional way, the way that Mother's Basement does, or any of the myriad anime content creators that you watch do. These conventions present the unique opportunity for you to ask questions of the industry, see patterns in the industry. So a perfect example of that is basically every manga distributor is leaning really heavily into LGBT queer content at this point. It's really clear. And the audience clearly wants that. The American Fujoshi audience is clearly out there. But if you don't go to those panels, you see that on the floor. There's more explicit content on the floor, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But, because I think there's something interesting happening there, too. You wouldn't know that if you didn't sit in the J novel, the Kaze, or several other panels where you're like, oh, they're all going after they're all going after Korean and Chinese content, but they're all also going after LGBTQI plus queer content, too. And that's just it's like an interesting angle there. But now I want to talk about the adult situation of the convention, because I think every year there are adult-themed booths at the convention. The two biggest ones that are always there are Faku and J18. They're both American-era manga publishers, I should note. And I'm not sure about Faku, but I know that J18 their work has been nominated for American Manga Awards multiple times at this point. Lots of stuff for lettering and also for adaptation and stuff like that. And Faku is the industry standard in America for H manga at this point. For H manga. But those booths are just out in the open, and they censor everything, and you can buy from them, but you have to check your ID, which is always hilarious, because a booth attendant is always, I need to see your ID. I'm like, sure. And I hand them my passport card, and we have a good laugh. But there's also booths that are completely closed, which means you can't go into the booth unless you show ID. Or, what I'm going to call semi-closed booths, which are mostly contained, but you can see in. And the most hilarious version of this was Panty and Stocking. Panty and Stocking has a sponsorship deal, has a collab deal with the Tenga company, which makes sex toys, which means that I went in and picked one up and checked, which means Imaishi gets his name on a Tenga product, which is hilarious. And in true hilarious fashion, they have the standard Tenga cup, but then they also have, for more expensive, a Tenga tissue paper dispenser, which is just one of the few times, one of the times when I'm like, people high-fived each other when they did this. Great job, team. We all get to go to dinner now. We're going to dinner to celebrate. Everybody high-five. Kind of collaboration. It was people were flabbergasted at it. And it was and even better, when you were in there, one of the guys was checking people out because people are buying Tenga products. I'm not kidding. Had the transaction approval number written on his hand. And I noticed you should write that on a piece of paper. Yeah, I should. It was genuinely hilarious and a good time. And everybody was truly engaged in the hilarity of it. But the last kind of booth you have is fully enclosed. There are door curtains and you have to show your ID even to get in. And they were there last year, and I believe they were there the year before too. But there's a cosplay outfit that does explicit cosplay shoots. And I heard people complaining about them because they felt like they were skirting the rules by selling straight up uncensored porn. But in my mind, they were fine because they enclosed the booth completely. They had explicit material, yes, but you could give your ID and you could get in there and you could buy what you wanted to buy. They'd black bag it the way they black bag everything. And I don't see the problem there, but it's never good when vendors feel it's not good. And also, and don't get me wrong, it's great to support art. I think it's great to support artists. I think it's amazing and incredible and awesome that anime conventions have become a culture of supporting indie artists and of going specifically to buy from indie artists and not necessarily just buy the biggest, greatest thing the more professional dealer's room is offering. And I think that I was really amazed in that for as much stuff as there was for sale, I didn't see any AI art. I also didn't see any of the 3D printed junk nearly as much as I've seen last year, as I've seen in previous years. I think I only saw one booth and I hilariously bought a fidget toy thing from them. But even that booth was like, I said to the guy, you picked right, he was selling like kunai and anime themed stuff. It wasn't just the same print in place flexi dragons that everybody always complains about at these conventions. He stopped and thought about the audience he was selling to. I'm going to do this and sell to the audience instead of just bringing my wares and hawking them to passerby kids. And I did appreciate that, but I see the amounts people buy at these things, and I'm always amazed. I don't think you need to be buying that much in an anime convention. And the stuff that I think you do need to be buying, that you should be buying, is not the stuff that I think a lot of people do buy. I didn't buy any art this year because I'm full currently in terms of what I can hang up and wear. But I think that a convention is a great place to meet the artists that you like, to meet the indie artists that you like, and to buy prints from them that are oftentimes sold out because very often, because it's so profitable for them, artists will explicitly do print runs for these conventions. So they have stuff available for the convention. But I just don't think you need to be spending hundreds of dollars at these things. I understand that it's a euphoria factor there, but what you're doing is you're spending money for the right to go spend more money. Where you could be spending money to go engage with the fandom and get in a room with the professional side of the medium that you're a fan of. A thing that I always appreciate about industry panels is there's always a question section afterwards. Like, you have to, even if it is PR trained people and the PR part of those companies, it's still like these companies sitting in front of the consumer at a base level and taking it to the chin a little. Even the Kave industry panel, which was essentially, what's the name of which is a major publisher's imprint, Harper, which is HarperCollins manga publishing imprint that they're bringing over to the U.S. Even they had a question section, and people put it to them, and they asked specific questions. And that's a big, weird deal. Because you're essentially getting access to a HarperCollins level publisher and being like, what are your plans for this? What are your plans for that? And they have to give some semblance of an answer. And they can't weasel out of it or backpedal out of it in a way that they can when it's online. And also, just like, yes, the art is nice. I'm staring at 2 pieces of art that I bought at a convention at 2 different anime NYCs now. But that's a very personal thing. And I think that where these conventions excel is in being communal. I can guarantee you can go to these conventions and you cannot spend a single red cent other than what's absolutely necessary. You can have an amazing time. And you can go to panels, you can meet people, you can go to panels, you can meet people, you take amazing pictures of amazing cosplayers, you can sit in screenings, you can meet and hang out with friends around the convention, after parties, and that's a really full con experience. I think that people's experience of shopping at these conventions, because you see tons of people posting that they spent $900, they spent $500, they spent over $1,000. The merch isn't the point. And yes, some amount of, and I'm certainly guilty of it, I've got anime figures. I've had anime figures collected anime figures for a long time. I've certainly slowed down my collecting, but I've done it for a long time. Yes, that's a big part of the otaku identity, but it's not the only part. And it's also the big part you can engage with everywhere else. And in terms of the dealer's room, when I stopped and thought about it, there's less and less professional presence on the con floor. They're all still there because they're right, and we didn't get access to it. And also, I don't know how big of a thing it was. I saw the stanchion for the presenter list, but I don't know how big of a thing it was. But there was a whole licensing event that ran, I believe, on Thursday, for longer than the convention was open. And that event was a chance for networking and all that stuff side of the industry, for the professional side of the convention, like I talked about earlier. But they weren't necessarily on the con floor in the same way that they were even the year before, or especially the year before that. I believe it was in 2024, they had a giant Luffy statue in the middle of the con floor. In this convention, as time has gone bigger and bigger in terms of events that they can advertise as being something you'll want to pay for a ticket for. They've gotten smaller and smaller in terms of the sheer spectacle they're giving to you for free. And I would hope if they're going to do a 10-year thing, just out of the show's own hubristic tendencies, that they would bring back some of that spectacle. And they would encourage, hey Viz, it's been a while since you bought one of the giant things. Bring a Gundam. Or bring something that shows that you showed up to show out thing. Because I take the same picture every year, and this is probably where I'll end it, but I take the same picture every year. And that picture is, I go up to the Crystal Mezzanine, which is a big thing above the Crystal Palace in the Javis. And they have viewing windows where you can view down to the con floor below. And in previous years, you'd see these big things that the convention floor was orbiting around.
Did you try again?
But this year, you didn't. And I hope that they can get back to making this to making the convention feel less marketplace, convention floor feel less marketplace and more festival, if that makes any sense. On that note, that's where I'm going to end it. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and if you did, be sure to subscribe wherever
wherever you're listening or watching. If you're listening to it on a podcast platform and they allow you to give a 5-star review, be sure to do that. If you're watching this on YouTube and you really liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the video. In addition, if you want to make sure that you don't miss a beat, be sure to hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes drop. But if you're wondering, they drop every Thursday night Eastern time. And on that note, if you really love the podcast and you really love what I'm trying to do here, be sure to give the website a look. That website is bento-box.ghost.io. There will be a link in the description of either this podcast or this video. It'll also be linked in the description of the entire podcast on the information page. It'll also be linked in the description of the YouTube channel. So there's plenty of ways for you to get to that website and check it out. If you want to follow me, my social links are also listed in the footer of that page. So once again, go over there to find that stuff. But I hope you like the episode. I look forward to talking to you next time. But until next time, I have been Alex. This has been Bento Radio, and I'll talk at you later.